The stars had rules. Every species that reached the stars learned this truth very quickly. The Galactic Accord was older than most civilizations. It had existed for 12,000 years, and in all that time, no one had dared to break it. 17 great empires controlled the galaxy. They had divided space among themselves long ago, drawing invisible lines across the darkness. Each empire had its territory, its planets, its people. And buried deep within the Accord, written in a language older than human history, was a simple rule that everyone followed. No species shall develop faster than light travel beyond the third threshold. The third threshold was fast. Ships could cross 100 light years in a single day. For the great empires, this was enough. They had built their civilization on this speed, fought their wars at this speed, and made their peace at this speed. The fourth threshold was something else entirely. It was faster, much faster. And every scientist in the galaxy agreed on one thing. The fourth threshold was impossible. Admiral Park Yuna stood on the bridge of her ship, the Eternal Dawn. She was 53 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and lines around her eyes from too many years of staring at stars. She had joined the Navy when she was 18, back when humanity had only 12 ships capable of traveling between stars. Now they had thousands. But today was different. Today would change everything. The bridge was quiet. Her crew worked at their stations without speaking. They all knew what was about to happen. They had spent 15 years preparing for this moment. Kang Do-an stood beside her. He was her chief engineer, a thin man with thick glasses who looked more like a professor than a military officer. In many ways, he was both. Do-hyun had spent his entire adult life trying to solve a problem that everyone said could not be solved. How do you break the laws of physics? The answer, as it turned out, was that you did not break them. You found a door that no one else had noticed, and you walked through it. The drive is ready, Do-hyun said. His voice was calm, but Yuna could see his hands shaking slightly. He had every right to be nervous. If his calculations were wrong, the ship would tear itself apart. If they were right, humanity would become something new. Commander Baek Ji-won approached from the navigation station. He was younger than Yuna, with a soldier's build and a worried expression. Admiral, are you certain about this? The moment we activate the drive, every sensor in the galaxy will detect us. The Council will know what we have done. Yuna nodded slowly. She had thought about this moment for years. She had imagined the fear in the alien empires when they realized what humanity had achieved. She had imagined the anger, the panic, the desperate scramble to respond. Let them know, she said. Let them all know. Humanity's history with the galaxy had not been kind. 400 years ago, when humans first ventured beyond their solar system, they had been greeted not with friendship, but with contempt. The great empires had looked at humanity and seen nothing worth respecting. Humans were weak. Humans were primitive. Humans were late to the game by thousands of years. The Galactic Council had debated what to do with this new species. Some had wanted to destroy them immediately. Others had argued for slavery. In the end, they had chosen something that felt like mercy, but was really just a slower form of death. They had given humanity one star system, one sun, one habitable planet, one small corner of the galaxy where humans could exist, contained and controlled, until they eventually faded away like so many other young species before them. The empires had expected humanity to accept this gift with gratitude. They had expected humans to build their little civilization in their little cage and never cause any trouble. They had made a terrible mistake. Yuna remembered her grandfather's stories. He'd been a young man when the aliens first came. He had watched the sky fill with ships larger than cities. He had felt the ground shake as the empires demonstrated their power. And he had seen the look in the alien ambassadors' eyes when they delivered their judgment, pity, dismissal, certainty that humans would never matter. Her grandfather had died when Una was 12. But before he passed, he had told her something she never forgot. "They think we are small," he had said. "But smallness is not weakness. A seed is small. And from a seed, a forest can grow." Now, 40 years later, Una was about to plant that seed. "All stations report ready," G1 announced. "The fourth threshold drive is at full power." Una looked at the view screen. Before them, space itself was beginning to change. The stars seemed to bend and twist. Colors that had no name rippled through the darkness. This was what happened when you pushed past the limits of what was supposed to be possible. "Engineering, final status report," Una said. Dalheen checked his instruments one last time. "All readings are within acceptable parameters. The mathematical models are holding. Admiral, we are ready to make history." Una allowed herself a small smile. 15 years of secret research. 15 years of hidden facilities and coded messages and careful lies. 15 years of building something the galaxy said could not exist. And now, in the next few seconds, all of that work would either succeed or fail. "Activate the drive," she ordered. The Eternal Dawn lurched forward. But this was not like any movement the crew had experienced before. It was not speed in the traditional sense. It was something beyond speed. Something that made the third threshold look like walking. On the view screen, the stars stretched into lines of light. Then even those lines disappeared. For a brief moment, there was nothing but pure whiteness, as if the ship had entered a space between spaces. Then suddenly they emerged. G1 stared at his instruments in disbelief. "Admiral, we just traveled 3,000 light years in 4 seconds. A gasp went through the bridge. At third threshold speeds, that journey would have taken 30 days. They had just compressed a month of travel into the time it took to breathe. "The drive is stable," Dohyun reported, his voice filled with wonder. "We did it. We actually did it." Una nodded, but she felt no joy yet. She knew what was coming next. She knew that across the galaxy, in 17 different capital worlds, alarm systems were screaming. She knew that ancient beings who had ruled the stars for millennia were suddenly realizing that their carefully controlled universe had just changed forever. And she knew that humanity's true test was about to begin. "Send the message," Una said. "Let Earth know that the fourth threshold is real. And let them know that we are ready for whatever comes next." The message went out at the speed of light, carrying news that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. But Una knew that the message was unnecessary in one sense. The empires would already know. Their sensors would have detected the impossible energy signature of the fourth threshold drive. Somewhere, in great halls of power that humans had never been allowed to enter, the rulers of the galaxy were waking up to a new reality. Humanity was no longer in its cage. And for the first time in 12,000 years, the great empires felt something they had almost forgotten could exist: fear. The High Chamber had not seen an emergency meeting in 3,000 years. The last time the great empires gathered in such panic, a star had exploded and destroyed an entire civilization. That had been a natural disaster, something beyond anyone's control. This was different. This was worse. Ambassador Thelvos of the Meridian Hegemony arrived first. He was a massive creature, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with 4 powerful arms and skin the color of dark stone. His species had ruled their corner of the galaxy for 8,000 years. They had crushed rebellions, conquered worlds, and built an empire that stretched across 10,000 star systems. Now, for the first time in his long life, Dalvos felt afraid. "This is impossible," he growled as the other ambassadors took their seats. "The humans are primitives. They should not have been able to develop a basic gravity drive, let alone breach the fourth threshold." Ambassador Yildrax of the Stellar Dominion flickered into existence as a hologram. Her species existed as beings of pure energy, having long ago abandoned physical forms. They were considered the most advanced civilization in the galaxy. They had studied the fourth threshold for 6,000 years and concluded it could not be crossed. "Perhaps," Yildrax said, her voice like wind through crystals, "we underestimated them." The chamber filled quickly. Representatives from all 17 empires gathered around the ancient table that had witnessed countless treaties and declarations. The table itself was older than human civilization by a factor of 10. It had seen empires rise and fall. It had heard the voices of species that no longer existed. But it had never witnessed anything quite like this. High Arbiter Kosovo called the meeting to order. He was the oldest being in the room, perhaps the oldest being in the galaxy. His species lived for tens of thousands of years, and Kosovo himself had helped write the original Galactic Accord. His body was frail now, supported by machines and technology, but his mind remained sharp. "We have all seen the sensor data," Kosovo said, his voice ancient and weary. "The humans have achieved fourth threshold travel. This is not a rumor. This is not a mistake. This is fact. Then we must destroy them immediately," Thelvos declared, "before they can spread further, before they can share this technology with other species. We must act now. And how do you propose we do that?" asked Ambassador Calathani of the Void Collective. Her people lived in the spaces between stars, feeding on dark matter and radiation. They were patient, cold, and logical. The fourth threshold allows them to move faster than any of our fleets. By the time we reach their systems, they will have already left. The argument went on for hours. Some demanded war. Others counseled patience. A few suggested negotiation, though they were quickly shouted down. The humans were insects, pests, a problem to be solved. You did not negotiate with problems. You eliminated them. But as the debate raged, a single question hung in the air that no one wanted to ask. How had the humans done it? On Earth, President Shin Yunji watched the alien panic with quiet satisfaction. She sat in her office in Seoul, surrounded by screens showing intelligence reports from across the galaxy. Humanity had spies everywhere now, hidden among the great empires, watching and listening. The aliens thought they had contained humanity. They did not realize that humans had been preparing for this moment for centuries. Yunji was 61 years old. She had been born in a small village in the mountains, the daughter of farmers who had never traveled more than 100 kilometers from their home. Now she led a species that had just broken the laws of the universe. Dr. Otaiwu stood beside her, watching the same screens. He was the physicist who had first discovered the theoretical possibility of the fourth threshold. 20 years ago, he had been a young professor at a small university, scribbling equations on a chalkboard. His colleagues had laughed at him. His papers had been rejected by every major journal. But the military had been watching, and they had seen something in his equations that others had missed. A door, a way out of the cage. "They are afraid," Taiwu observed. "I did not expect them to be so afraid." "They have every reason to be," Yunji replied. "For 12,000 years, they have controlled the galaxy. They have decided who lives and who dies, who rises and who falls. And now, suddenly, a species they dismissed as irrelevant has done something they believed was impossible." She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the city of Seoul stretched toward the horizon, millions of lights glittering in the darkness. On streets below, people went about their lives, unaware that the future of their species was being decided. "The question is, what do we do next?" Yoonji said. General Choi Mira entered the room. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and the bearing of someone who had spent her life preparing for war. She had commanded human forces in a dozen small conflicts against alien raiders and pirates. Now she was about to command something much larger. Madam President, Mira said, our intelligence suggests the Meridian hegemony is preparing a fleet. 2,000 warships. They plan to strike Proxima Station within the month. Yoonji nodded slowly. This was expected. The aliens would test humanity, try to crush them before they could grow stronger. It was what any empire would do when faced with a sudden threat. How many ships can we send to defend the station? She asked. 42, Myra replied. The number hung in the air. 42 ships against 2,000. By any normal calculation, it was a death sentence. But nothing about this situation was normal. 42 ships for threshold drives, Taiwu said quietly. Against 2,000 ships that cannot imagine what we are capable of. Yoonji turned back to the window. She thought about her ancestors, about all the generations of humans who had looked up at the stars and dreamed of reaching them. She thought about the cage the aliens had built for her species, and she thought about what it meant to finally break free. The universe told us we were small, she said. The empires told us we would never matter. They gave us one star and expected us to be grateful. They thought that if they contained us long enough, we would simply fade away. She turned to face her advisors, and her eyes were hard. They were wrong. And now they are about to learn just how wrong they were. In the high chamber, the debate had finally reached a conclusion. The 17 empires would send a message to humanity. They would demand surrender of the fourth threshold technology. They would demand that humans return to their single system and accept permanent military oversight. They would demand complete submission. If humanity refused, the empires would declare war. Ambassador Thelvo smiled as the resolution passed. He had no doubt about the outcome. Humanity would surrender. They had no choice. 42 ships could not stand against 2,000. A single species could not stand against 17 empires. He did not understand that he was about to make the greatest mistake in galactic history. He did not understand that humans did not measure strength in numbers alone. And he did not understand that somewhere in the darkness of space, Admiral Park Yuna was watching the sensor data and smiling the same cold smile that had terrified enemies for 30 years. The cage was broken. The battle was coming, and humanity was ready. The fleet of the Meridian hegemony was a thing of terrible beauty. 2,000 warships moved through space in perfect formation, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built. The smallest of them could reduce a city to dust in seconds. The largest could crack a planet in half. Admiral Verthax commanded from the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Vengeance. He was old even by the standards of his long-lived species, with scars across his stone-colored skin from 100 battles. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had hunted pirates through asteroid fields. He had never lost. Report, he ordered as the fleet dropped out of third threshold near Proxima Station. Sensors detect 42 human vessels, his tactical officer responded. They are holding position around the station. Verthax allowed himself a rumbling laugh. 42? They sent 42 ships to face us? He had expected more. He had prepared for at least 1,000 human vessels, perhaps more. The intelligence reports had suggested that humanity was building ships at an impressive rate. But this was not a battle. This was an execution. Order the fleet to advance, Verthax commanded. Standard encirclement pattern. I want those ships destroyed and that station captured within the hour. Lieutenant Yoon-hana watched the alien fleet approach on her tactical display. She was 26 years old, and until 3 months ago, She had never commanded anything larger than a training vessel. Now she was in charge of the defense of Proxima Station. 42 ships, 80,000 people on the station, and 2,000 enemies who expected to sweep them aside like dust. Beside her, Ensign Quan Jiho worked frantically at the sensor console. His hands were shaking so badly he could barely read the data. "Lieutenant, they are surrounding us. We have no escape route." "Good," Hana said. Jiho looked at her like she had gone insane. "Good?" "Lieutenant, we are going to die." Hana turned to face him. Her expression was calm, almost peaceful. It was the expression of someone who knew something that others did not. "Ensign, let me ask you a question. When you learned to fight in the academy, what was the first lesson they taught you?" Jiho blinked, confused by the question. "Never let yourself be surrounded." "And why is that?" "Because if you are surrounded, you cannot escape. You cannot retreat. You are trapped." Hana nodded slowly. "That is what they taught us. That is what every military academy in the galaxy teaches. Do not be surrounded. Do not be trapped." She turned back to the display. But they forgot to consider one thing. What thing? Hana's smile was the smile of a wolf seeing prey. If you are in the center, and your enemies are all around you, then you can attack in every direction at once. And more importantly, if you have 4 threshold drives, you are never truly surrounded. Because you can leave and return faster than they can blink. The alien fleet had nearly completed its encirclement. Berthax was pleased. The human ships were not even attempting to flee. Perhaps they had accepted their fate. Perhaps they understood that resistance was useless. "All ships, prepare to fire on my command," Berthax ordered. "I want concentrated fire on the human flagship. We will destroy their leader first, then pick off the rest." "Admiral," his sensor officer interrupted. "I am reading unusual energy signatures from the human vessels." "What kind of signatures?" "Unknown. They do not match any patterns in our database. The readings are fluctuating rapidly, as if their ships are—" The officer never finished his sentence. In the space of a single heartbeat, the 42 human ships vanished. They did not fly away. They did not accelerate. They simply disappeared, as if they had never existed. For a moment, there was silence on the bridge of the eternal vengeance. Then the explosions began. The human ships reappeared inside the formation, not outside it. They emerged from 4 threshold jumps at point-blank range, weapons already firing. In the time it took Berthax to draw a breath, 3 of his warships had been destroyed. "Impossible," he whispered. "You cannot use threshold drives in combat. The calculations take hours. The energy requirements." But the humans did not care what was impossible. They vanished again, reappearing on the other side of the formation. More ships died. The alien fleet tried to respond, but they were firing at ghosts. Every time they targeted a human vessel, it was already gone. In the command chair of her ship, Hana felt time slow down around her. The tactical display showed her everything. Enemy positions, firing solutions, escape routes. Her fingers danced across the controls with a precision that surprised even herself. "All ships, execute pattern 7, she ordered through the fleet communication channel. "Target their engine sections. Disable. Do not destroy unless necessary." Jiho stared at her. "Disable? Lieutenant, they came to kill us. And we are going to send them home with a message," Hana replied. "The message is not that we can kill them. Anyone can kill. The message is that we chose not to. That we showed mercy when they expected slaughter. That will frighten them far more than any body count." The battle, if it could be called that, lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes of chaos as the most powerful fleet the Meridian hegemony had ever assembled was systematically torn apart by 42 small ships that refused to follow the rules of warfare. When it was over, 63 alien warships limped away from Proxima Station. Their weapons were destroyed. Their engines were damaged. But they were alive. The rest of the fleet drifted in space, disabled but not destroyed. Nearly 2,000 ships, carrying millions of crew members, helpless and waiting for rescue. And watching over them all, the 42 human vessels stood guard. Admiral Verthax sat in the ruins of his bridge. The lights had failed. Emergency power flickered weakly. Around him, his crew worked desperately to restore basic systems. He had never been defeated. In 300 years of warfare, he had never lost a single engagement. And now, in 11 minutes, a young human officer had shown him that everything he knew about combat was obsolete. His communication system crackled to life. A human voice spoke in perfect Meridian language. Admiral Verthax, this is Lieutenant Yoon Hanna of the United Human Navy. Your fleet is disabled. We are sending rescue vessels to assist your wounded. We will tow your ships to the edge of human space and release them. Verthax found his voice. Why? Why did you not destroy us? There was a pause. When Hannah spoke again, her voice was quiet but firm. Because we remember what it felt like to be helpless. To have a stronger power stand over us and decide our fate. We remember the fear and the shame of being conquered. We will not inflict that on others, even on those who came to destroy us. Another pause. Go home, Admiral. Tell your council what happened here. Tell them that humanity does not want war. But also tell them this. We will never be caged again. And if you force us to fight, we will not lose. The communication ended. Verthax sat in silence for a long time. He thought about his long career, about all the battles he had won, about all the enemies he had crushed. He thought about the contempt he had felt for humans just hours ago. And he realized that the galaxy had just changed forever. Within days, recordings of the battle spread across the stars. Every empire watched as the Meridian hegemony, one of the oldest and most powerful civilizations in existence, was humiliated by a species they had dismissed as insects. And in 17 capital worlds, 17 rulers looked at the footage and felt something they had almost forgotten could exist. Pure, absolute terror. The message from the Galactic Council arrived on Earth 3 days after the Battle of Proxima Station. It was written in the formal language of the Accord, filled with ancient phrases and diplomatic terminology. But stripped of all its formality, the message was simple. Surrender or die. The Council demanded that humanity turn over all fourth threshold technology immediately. They demanded that human scientists be placed under permanent alien supervision. They demanded that the human fleet be reduced to a maximum of 100 ships. They demanded that humanity accept military observers on every world, every station, every ship. In exchange for this complete submission, the 17 empires would graciously allow humanity to continue existing. President Shin Yoonji read the message in her office, surrounded by her closest advisors. General Choi Myra stood by the window, her jaw tight with anger. Dr. Oh Taiwu sat in the corner, quietly reviewing data on his tablet. And Ambassador Suman waited patiently for the president's response. Suman was an unusual choice for humanity's chief diplomat. She had not grown up in politics or government. Until 10 years ago, she had been a middle school teacher in Bizen, spending her days helping children understand history and literature. But she had a gift for languages and a talent for reading people that no formal training could match. When the government had begun secretly preparing for the day humanity would challenge the Accord, they had searched for someone who could represent the human spirit to the galaxy. They had found Suman. "What do you think?" Yoonji asked her. Suman considered the question carefully. "They are afraid. This demand is not a negotiating position. It is panic disguised as strength. They expected us to crumble after their fleet was defeated. Instead, we showed mercy. That confused them. Frightened people make harsh demands because they do not know what else to do. Can we negotiate with frightened people? Myra asked. We can try, Suman replied. But first, we must make them understand that their demands are impossible. Not because we are being stubborn, but because what they are asking for does not exist. Yoonji frowned. What do you mean? They want us to give them the fourth threshold technology. But the technology is not a machine or a blueprint. It is a way of thinking. It is centuries of human science and mathematics and philosophy, all coming together in a single breakthrough. We cannot hand it over because it is not a thing. It is who we are. She stood and walked to the window beside Myra. They do not understand this because they have never had to fight for their place in the universe. They inherited their empires from ancestors who conquered and killed. They have never been the small ones, the weak ones, the ones who had to be clever because they could not be strong. So we refuse their demands, Eunji said. Then what? Then I go to the high chamber and explain why we refuse. And I make them see that we are not their enemy. We are not their subject. We are their equal, whether they like it or not. The journey to the high chamber took Suman 3 weeks. She traveled on a diplomatic vessel, accompanied by a small staff and a security team that she insisted remain invisible. She wanted to appear before the council not as a warrior or a conqueror, but as a teacher, someone who had come to explain a simple truth. The high chamber was located on a world called the Nexus, at the exact gravitational center of the 17 Empire's territories. It was a neutral ground, a sacred space where no weapons were allowed and no violence could occur. Here, the great powers had negotiated treaties and declarations for 12,000 years. Suman arrived to find the chamber already full. Representatives from all 17 empires were present, their faces showing various mixtures of anger, fear, and contempt. At the head of the great table sat High Arbiter Kosovo, ancient and patient, watching her with eyes that had seen civilizations rise and fall. You stand before the Galactic Council, Kosovo announced, his voice filling the vast space. You may speak. Suman walked to the center of the chamber. She was a small woman in a simple dress, surrounded by beings of immense power and vast age. Any other human might have felt terrified. Suman felt only calm. Honored members of the council, she began, I come before you not to accept your demands, and not to reject them. I come to explain why your demands are based on a misunderstanding. Ambassador Thelvos slammed his forearms against the table. There is no misunderstanding. You have violated the accord. You have developed forbidden technology. You will surrender it or face the consequences. Suman met his eyes without flinching. Ambassador, you call it forbidden technology. But what we have achieved is not technology. It is evolution. You cannot demand that we unevolve. You cannot demand that we become less than what we are. She turned slowly, addressing the entire chamber. For 400 years, humanity existed in the cage you built for us. One star system, one chance. You expected us to wither and die, grateful for the mercy you had shown us. But we did not die. We did not wither. We grew. Her voice strengthened as she continued. We grew because that is what humans do. We face impossible odds, and we find a way. We look at barriers, and we ask how to break them. You gave us a prison and called it a gift. Instead, you gave us a challenge. High Arbiter Kosovo leaned forward. And now you bring chaos to a galaxy that has known peace for millennia. Peace? Suman's voice was sharp. Is it peace when 17 empires control every star? Is it peace when young species are crushed before they can grow? Is it peace when the rules are written to ensure that no one new can ever rise? She shook her head. That is not peace. That is control. and humanity will not be controlled. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Ambassadors shouted threats and accusations. Some demanded that Suman be arrested. Others called for immediate war. Through it all, Suman stood calmly in the center of the storm. When the noise finally died down, she spoke again. "You can fight us. Perhaps you will even win. But consider the cost. We have already defeated your greatest fleet with 42 ships. We have technology you do not understand. And we have something else that you have never faced." "What is that?" Ambassador Yuldrax asked, her energy form flickering with curiosity. "We have nothing to lose," Suman replied. "You have empires. You have territories. You have wealth and power and everything you have built over thousands of years. We have one star system and the knowledge that you wanted us to disappear. If you push us to war, we will fight with the desperation of a species that has nothing left to protect except its survival." She paused, letting her words sink in. "Or we can talk. We can find a new arrangement, one that recognizes humanity as a partner rather than a pest. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We do not want to destroy your empires. We want only one thing. And what is that?" Kosovo asked. Suman's answer was simple. "We want the chance to grow, to explore, to become whatever we have the potential to become, without cages, without limits, without permission." The chamber was silent. Thelvo spoke, his voice heavy with something that might have been grudging respect. "You are asking us to change everything we have built over 12,000 years. "No," Suman said. "I am asking you to add one more seat at your table. One more voice in your chamber. One more species that has earned the right to stand among you." She looked around at the gathered powers of the galaxy, beings who had ruled the stars since before humanity had discovered fire. "The choice is yours. You can fight the future, or you can be part of it." For a long moment, no one spoke. The weight of history pressed down on the chamber, old certainties crumbling under the force of new realities. And somewhere in the silence, the galaxy began to change. 3 years passed. 3 years of negotiations that sometimes felt like they would never end. 3 years of arguments and compromises and careful diplomacy. And 2 assassination attempts on Ambassador and Suman. The first came 6 months into the negotiations. A member of the Void Collective, acting alone according to the official story, tried to poison Suman during a diplomatic dinner. She survived because she had developed the habit of having all her food tested before eating. The assassin was captured and executed by his own people, who were embarrassed by the failure. The second attempt was more direct. A bomb was planted in her quarters on the Nexus. The explosion destroyed 3 rooms and killed 2 of her security guards. Suman survived because she had stepped out for a walk moments before, unable to sleep. After that, she began sleeping in a different location every night. She never complained. She never showed fear. She simply continued doing her job. "They will keep trying until they succeed," General Choi Myra had warned her. "Come home. Let someone else take over." "If I leave now," Suman had replied, "they will know that violence works. They will know that humans can be scared away. I will not give them that victory." So she stayed. And slowly, impossibly, the negotiations moved forward. The hardest part was convincing the empires that humanity did not want to replace them. For 12,000 years, the galaxy had operated on a simple principle. The strong dominated, and the weak submitted. The idea that a species could become powerful without wanting to conquer was genuinely confusing to many of the alien representatives. "What do you actually want?" Ambassador Thelvos had asked during one late-night session, his voice tired and genuinely curious. Suman had thought for a long moment before answering. "I used to be a teacher. Every year, new students would come to my class. Some were smart. Some struggled. Some were kind, and some were difficult. But every single one of them had potential. Every single one of them could grow into something wonderful if given the chance. She had looked at the massive alien with something like compassion. That is what we want for humanity. The chance to grow. The chance to discover what we can become. Not at your expense. Alongside you. As neighbors. As partners. Perhaps, someday, as friends. Thalvos had been silent for a long time. When he spoke again, his voice was softer than she had ever heard it. My species has not made a friend in 8,000 years. We have made subjects. Allies of convenience. Enemies who became too tired to fight. But never friends. Perhaps it is time to learn something new. The new accord was signed on a day that would be celebrated across human space for centuries to come. The ceremony was held in the high chamber of the Nexus, the same room where Suman had first addressed the council 3 years earlier. Admiral Park, Yuna attended as the representative of human military power. She wore her formal uniform, decorated with medals from a career that had changed history. Beside her stood President Shin Yunji, who had guided humanity through the most dangerous years of its existence. On the other side of the great table, High Arbiter Kosovo waited with the representatives of the 17 original empires. The ancient being looked older than ever, his body supported by machines that hummed quietly in the sacred silence of the chamber. "Before we sign," Kosovo said, "I would ask Fleet Admiral Park a question." Yuna stepped forward. "Ask. Your technology gave you absolute advantage. After the Battle of Proxima Station, you could have struck at any world in the galaxy. You could have destroyed our fleets, conquered our territories, made yourselves rulers of everything. Why did you not?" It was a question that had been asked many times over the past 3 years. Yuna had given different answers to different people. But here, in this moment, she wanted to give the truest answer she could. "Because we remember," she said simply. "Remember what?" "We remember being small. We remember being dismissed and contained and expected to disappear. We remember what it felt like to have no power, no voice, no future." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "If we had used our advantage to conquer, we would have become exactly what we hated. We would have become you. The old you, I mean. The version that built cages for young species." She looked at Kosovo with something approaching respect. "We did not fight for power. We fought for freedom. And you cannot build freedom on a foundation of conquest." Kosovo was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. "In 12,000 years, no species has ever given me an answer I did not expect. Until now." He turned to the table. "Let us sign the new accord." The signing took hours. Every clause had to be read aloud, translated into 17 different languages, witnessed by representatives of every empire. But finally, when the last signature was recorded, something shifted in the chamber. The galaxy had an 18th seat at its table. Humanity had been recognized not as a subject or a prisoner, but as an equal partner in the great family of the stars. Celebrations erupted across human space. On Earth, on the colonies, on every station and ship where humans lived and worked, people cheered and wept and embraced. They had been given one star system and told to die quietly. Instead, they had changed the universe. In Seoul, Dr. Otaiwu watched the ceremony on a small screen in his apartment. He was old now, his hair white and his hands unsteady. The equations that had started everything were framed on his wall. The paper yellowed with age. His daughter, Oyeri, sat beside him. She was 32 years old, a physicist like her father, with the same distant look in her eyes that came from spending too much time thinking about impossible things. "It is done," Taiwu said quietly. "We are part of the galaxy now. Yeri nodded, but her mind was clearly elsewhere. She had been scribbling equations on a tablet all morning, filling page after page with mathematics that even her father struggled to follow. "Dad," she said suddenly, "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" She held up the tablet. The equations covered the screen, dense and complex. "I think I have figured out the fifth threshold." Taiwu stared at her. For a moment, he could not speak. His daughter had just casually mentioned something that would shake the galaxy to its foundations. "The fifth threshold," he repeated. "You mean faster than the fourth?" "Much faster. I have been working on it for 6 years, ever since I saw your original equations." "You found a door, Dad, but you did not see where the door led." "There are more doors. Many more." Taiwu leaned back in his chair. He thought about the Battle of Proxima Station, about the fear in the alien empires, about the long years of negotiation. Humanity had just been accepted as an equal partner in the galactic community. And now his daughter was telling him that they were about to make another impossible leap. He started to laugh. It was a deep, wondering laugh, the laugh of a man who had learned to expect miracles. "They are going to panic again," he said. "The council is going to absolutely panic." Yeri smiled, a mischievous smile that reminded him of her mother. "Perhaps. Or perhaps this time they will be curious instead of afraid. Perhaps we have taught them something about change. And if they are afraid again, then we will teach them again, as many times as it takes." Taiwu looked out the window at the night sky. The stars glittered like diamonds scattered across black cloth. For most of human history, those stars had been unreachable. Then they had been a prison. Now they were a home. And soon, they would be just the beginning. "Then I suppose," he said, reaching for his own tablet and a fresh page of equations, "we had better tell the galaxy to hold on to something." Outside, the stars kept burning, patient and eternal. They had witnessed the rise and fall of 1,000 civilizations. They had seen empires grow from nothing and crumble back to dust. Now they were about to witness something new. A species that refused to accept limits. A people who looked at the impossible and saw only a challenge waiting to be met. Humanity had broken one barrier. They would break others. And with each barrier broken, they would carry with them the lesson they had learned in the cage. You cannot contain a species that refuses to be contained. You cannot limit a people who do not believe in limits. And you cannot write the end of a story when the characters keep turning the page. The galaxy had changed, and it would never stop changing again.